Welcome back to the KAHI Afternoon News. Good afternoon. I am Casey Freelove. We head out to Washington. Pleased to be joined by Congressman Tom McClintock for our weekly conversation. And Tom, we're right before I go on the air here recording this. I've been following all day, all week, for many weeks. Is there any new information you can share or anything new that you learned today? I have a couple of different discussion topics I want to get into, but as far as the latest with the possible impeachment articles here?
Well, I think that's been foreordained since the Democrats took a majority of the House. Since the 2016 election, they've been calling for the president's impeachment and searching around for one pretext after another to hang that on. When they got the majority in 2018, it began in earnest, and Jerry Nadler was overheard the day after the election on the train back to Washington, plotting their impeachment vote. So this has been cooked into the process since the voters gave them the majority, and now it's coming to a head. And it's very interesting. You look at the Articles of Impeachment, they do not charge treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's the standard for impeachment. Instead, they make up two crimes that simply don't exist. One's abuse of power, that is, exercising his lawful powers in a manner that Congress doesn't like, and obstruction of Congress, that is, going to court to protect the same doctrine of executive privilege that was first asserted by George Washington. And that's exactly what the founders feared, that political differences rather than the law would propel an impeachment. If that were ever to happen, James Madison warned, this would reduce the president from a co-equal branch of government into a subordinate minister serving at the pleasure of Congress. That completely destroys the separation of powers that's at the heart of our Constitution.
No, and in following your different speeches, which I've seen on your website, of course, on your Twitter page, you've been kind of openly saying how dangerous a precedent this could set. I know you just talked about it a little bit there, but it seems like this could be something where essentially whoever somebody doesn't like, they can just go after impeachment with every president from now on, and that doesn't benefit anybody in the American public, really. I don't
Can
think.
you imagine the number of times that Barack Obama would have been impeached by the Republican House during his 8 years in office? The pallets of cash being sent to Iran's dictators being just one notable example of what this does is to reduce the standard of impeachment to basically any partisan differences between the House and the presidency. That means that it's going to be a constant fixture in our national life in the future if this precedent is allowed to stand.
I was watching your interview with Laura Ingraham. You were there with a couple other congressmen, including Ken Buck from Colorado. Mr. Buck was talking about procedural flaws as well. Did you have any thoughts on that? Just the way that this thing has gone. I know we keep talking about the same thing, and I want to talk to you about what you're working on as far as keeping us safe from wildfires and the deforestation and all that. But this is just the only thing that they're occupying all your time with. So as far as the way that they've gone about it procedurally, it has been flawed, correct?
Well, it's not just flaws in procedure. They've completely shredded the most fundamental principles of due process that are enshrined in our Bill of Rights. For example, that they've argued that hearsay evidence, better known as gossip, is better than direct testimony. They're basing their entire case on that. That's legally inadmissible in any court. They are admitting it here. They've argued the burden of proof rests with the accused to prove his innocence. They've argued that the right to confront your accuser is actually an invasion of the accuser's privacy. They've argued that if you appeal to the courts to defend your constitutional rights, that's ipso facto obstruction of justice and evidence of your guilt. They've asserted the power to determine what witnesses the defense is allowed to call. And as I pointed out, they've argued that a crime is not necessary to impeach, only impure motives in performing lawful acts, and of course motives to be divined solely by the accusers. These are the legal doctrines that have brought this matter to a head. And if that sounds frightening, remember they're essentially the same legal doctrines that college students now face in Title IX prosecutions, where they're not allowed to confront their accuser, not allowed to call witnesses. The burden of proof is on them to prove their innocence. These are the legal doctrines of despots, And on college campuses, they've already produced a litany of injustices by false accusation. And this is the underpinning of the entire process. So it's not just a simple procedural question. It cuts right to the very soul of the American justice system.
Is it too late to turn back if this moves forward? And what I mean by that is, as we've discussed in the past, it looks like, I mean, no Republicans are going to vote for impeachment in Congress. And then the Senate, where the GOP has a majority, according to the Associated Press, is expected to acquit President Trump in a trial next year. But does that mean that whichever party feels like that they have the right to do this cannot go about doing it in the future? Or is this kind of just really opening up a Pandora's box that we're never going to be able to turn back from?
It completely changes the standard for impeachment from treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors to any lawful discharge of a constitutional authority that the Congress doesn't like. That means that every president and every decision henceforth is going to have to be wondering, if I act on this according to my duty, is the Congress going to impeach me because they don't like it? And as I said, you apply that to what was going on during the Obama administration, we would have had an impeachment a week.
It just seems really dangerous. Again, I blame in part the media, because a lot of news outlets aren't giving people the true story. This is why I like having you on, because you're there, you're telling me what you're seeing. I've been reading things that are backing up what you're talking about. It just feels like the media has got people off in this la-la land where they think, oh yeah, let's just impeach him and then he won't be our president next time. But I've never seen a mess like this in my years of following politics. As far as you, I mean, you're a political historian. You've been a representative for a long time. Where does this stack up as far as something you've had to deal with in your career?
Well, we don't have experience in our lifetimes. I think the closest experience you can get is the years leading up to 1860, when the Democrats refused to accept the legitimate election of Abraham Lincoln. That's only happened, and as I pointed out at the House Judiciary Committee when we began this last week, that democracy depends on whoever loses at least respecting the will of the voters and accepting that as their decision. I mean, everybody in every election, somebody wins, somebody loses.
Right.
If the losers refuse to accept the will of the voters, well, then you have anarchy, and that is, we're starting to see that seep into our political process. For example, the respect for law collapses if you're going to go on the assumption that you're not going to accept the will of the voters and that the institution is illegitimate. Well, then the laws that it creates are illegitimate. And we just saw that with the Inspector General's report, showing how senior officials at the FBI and the Justice Department absolutely shredded the Fourth Amendment because they felt that the end justifies the means. The president's illegitimate, therefore we can break any law we choose because the laws are therefore illegitimate. That's the mentality that now appears to be animating the political left, and it's frightening. And the Inspector General's report, which got, I understand, zero attention on the network news, is absolutely frightening in what it clearly documents was going on at the highest levels of the FBI.
We can only hope that over time, somebody will do their journalistic duty and can get that out there. I mean, thankfully, if people want to look online, I mean, you can dig for this stuff, folks, but it isn't going to be presented to you, believe me, because I've been following the coverage on television, visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here. Tom, let me just bring it back to our home state of California for a moment. I've been doing news stories this week about the state's California's landmark labor law, Assembly Bill 5, which is going into effect January 1st. I'm a big sports guy. I'm our sports director here, and I've been seeing a lot of freelancers that I know basically say, look, we have been told that we are no longer going to be able to do our profession because the state has written a law, aimed at gig economy. I'm not sure exactly, but the bottom line is it seems like it's another kind of tarnish for our state, because you're taking people that are very competent and good at their jobs and taking away their ability to make money because Governor Newsom thought that it would be a good idea to put in, or actually it wasn't him. I'll say it was Lorena Gonzalez from San Diego. But the bottom line is it feels like it's another blow to the California workforce. And it's not just going to affect journalists. It's going to affect truck drivers, could affect different people that work in rideshare opportunities. And it's just a bad look in my mind. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on this bill.
Well, it's a direct attack on people's freedom to make a living. The freedom of a buyer and seller to freely negotiate the terms of their relationship. that is what is destroyed by this. Um, uh, 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 the freedom of people to negotiate for themselves the terms that they find mutually acceptable is at the very heart of any prosperous society. There's a protection against a bad deal. There's a protection against work conditions or wages that are unacceptable. It's the word no. No, thank you. I'll apply elsewhere. No, thank you. I'll find somebody else to do business with. What is happening is the government is replacing the individual's freedom to make that decision with its own judgment, and that is always going to reduce the economic opportunities of any individual and their freedom to live their lives according to their own best lights.
And, in my opinion, you're just going to take some people that are very talented at what they do. And again, we talk about this flight from California. You're going to drive them right out of the state.
No, that's the practical effect of it. Exactly right. People end up voting with their feet and leaving, and we're seeing that now in record numbers in California. And it really is ironic when you look at the census numbers. So many of them are going out in the middle of the Nevada desert. And I've often marveled at the fact that no conceivable act of God could turn our beautiful state into a less desirable place for people to live in the middle of the Nevada nuclear test range. Acts of God aren't that catastrophic, but acts of government can be. And if you look at the census data, they are. People are voting with their feet and leaving.
We've been visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KI. Tom, this is the last time we'll have the opportunity to speak for 2019. Just on behalf of the listeners and myself, thank you so much for being with us. Happy holidays to you and your family, and we'll look forward to talking to you in the new year.
And to you, too, not just the new year, the new decade. This is not only the end of the year, it's the end of the second decade of the 21st century. Can you believe that?
I can't believe it. Time flies, It feels like a Bob Seger lyric or something, Well, Tom, thanks again, of course. We appreciate it.
Take care.
We'll take a quick break and be right back.